Hey, everybody. Good morning. Happy Saturday. It is Saturday, March 11th, I believe. And I am here with somebody very special today that we want to share his story with. And I'll let him introduce himself, where he's from, a little bit about his childhood and his family, and what brought him to today. And then we'll share his Augusta story.
Thanks, Liz. My name's Derek Doran. I'm from Allen Park, Michigan, just outside of Detroit area. That's where my territory is with Augusta. And I was one of the franchisees in the 20s as far as what number I signed up as. And this is where I was born and raised outside of college. I've lived here my whole life. And I have three older brothers. Almost all my family lives here. So I come from a family of just boys. And I'm married to my wife, Jen. We've been married 6.5 years. And we have one son, Patrick. He's almost 11 months old. So
Excellent.
that's that's some background.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to today. And the reason I like to share these interviews is not just for people that join Augusta or interested in joining Augusta, but mainly for business owners in general. And men, women, anybody that's in business, small, large businesses, to just encourage them and realize that we're all just people and we're all just trying to make our way through the world and build good businesses and businesses that also impact others in a positive manner. So if you could just tell us what was the final thing that brought you to Augusta, but before that, tell us about how you even heard about it. Did you hear about Mike first? Did you follow his content? How did you hear about Augusta?
Yeah, it's kind of, I have a weird story with like getting into lawn care, getting out of it, and getting back in.
Yeah,
The
let's
getting
hear it.
back in is what involved Augusta.
Okay.
Um, But briefly, I grew up mowing lawns like a lot of people. I started mowing lawns when I was like 12. My brothers and I did that to save for college. So I had a background in lawn care. How I first found Augusta or found Mike was I was considering leaving a job and I wanted to get into lawn care. I'd been interested in it. And we were on vacation in Florida. And being in Michigan, we had a long drive home. And I just literally pulled up my phone. I was like, I wonder if there's any podcasts about lawn care or landscaping.
Wow.
And I typed in landscaping or something and landscape business course or whatever the podcast was called back then. This would have been 2018.
Mhm.
Um, that's how I first found Mike. So I just literally started driving home to Michigan with hours to listen. And it was just Mike doing his podcast, helping people out, and that was at a much different stage, obviously, than what it is now.
For
But that was
sure.
my first introduction to Augusta.
Okay, and what
Um,
kind of content was he sharing? Was it just in his little room with his whiteboard? And was it real good depth at that point that attracted you? Or was it the clickbait, which really wasn't a thing at that time?
no, honestly, so it was all audio for me at that time. There probably was YouTube, but just because that was my first exposure, it was only the podcast format.
Okay.
So I think it was mainly, certain topics he was hitting on, or he was helping people specifically with their issues. And I just had never encountered someone that was taking such a strategic, like mathematical numbers approach to lawn care and, factoring in how much your labor should be compared to, what you're producing. Because for my background, I think a lot of people, you are doing the work by yourself. You're never even really paying an employee. So it's a mindset shift when you start thinking, how do I make this work if I'm paying people? So that's what just attracted me to it. And I was like, wow, how does this guy like, I didn't know anything about Mike. So just audio as well. Like I didn't know that he was actually really close to my age.
Yeah,
So it was funny because I figured this guy was like 40, like he
right.
has all this experience. So
Hmm.
but yeah, I was just hooked from the beginning because there was a clear disparity between what I knew and what he was talking about. So yeah, from the moment I listened, I knew there's a lot to gain there.
It makes me actually wonder if you were listening on the podcast and there really was no YouTube. I remember back then it wasn't just lawn care. I remember there would be people calling about their snowboard business or it was like a huge genre of people. And all he did was give us time. And if he didn't know
Right.
about the topic, he would get back to them and give them the information they needed. But I remember being astounded also because I knew him. And I was I didn't work with him at that time, but I was surprised at really the wisdom. And now that you think about it, I knew how old he was, but I guess because there was no visual, nobody would have. So they would have all thought the same thing as you, that it was an older person.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I think that's one of the things that also, I mean, I'm going to get into several things I like about Augusta and love, but one thing that Mike is really good at is a very just appropriate level of confidence, a very humble confidence
Hmm.
where, um, if you are that knowledgeable and if you're doing that many big things at a young age, a lot of people will be held back by fear of hiring people older than them.
Hmm.
Um, Going into it, not realizing he was basically my peer
Hmm.
in as far as age goes, it was impressive to me how he just doesn't let that affect things. He moves forward, and obviously other people have to deal with it and figure out if they can work for someone and be humble enough to work for someone younger than them. But yeah, I found that very intriguing from the start.
Hmm. So you had a lawn care business, or you were doing lawn care for money. And then
Yes.
you said you got out of it and back in. So was there some sort of incident, or what happened that you would actually get back into lawn care? This was before Augusta.
Yeah. Um, I can be long winded, so just flag me down when I talk too
I
much.
will.
But um, 2018, I started my first, business on my own.
Hmm.
I growing up had done it with my family, but 2018, I was like, all right, let's go for it. I had quit my job and basically with 2 weeks notice, had to get this thing off the ground. And the very condensed version of why I quit that job is I was actually going to seminary and working at a church pursuing ministry.
Hmm.
I still go to that church, still have great relationships there, but I realized that vocational ministry was not the direction, at least for right now, that I
Hmm.
wanted to head. So
Hmm.
I was employed though by the church under this assumption of you're training for ministry. My dad is actually the pastor of that church. We had this conversation and I was, you know, showing my cards essentially, hey, I really think vocational ministry is not where I'm headed. And I respect my dad for this. He didn't want to have any nepotism where, like, oh, yeah, we'll just let you keep working here, even though you're hired under the assumption you're pursuing ministry. So it's basically like, yeah, you're turning in your 2 weeks notice.
Wow.
So I,
Was
in
he
the spring,
disappointed?
he was not at
Okay.
all. Yeah, my dad's very hands off. He's, my parents were very, intentional, but basically once we hit 18 or once we got married and we're out of the house, they're not overbearing. So
Hmm.
something that was helpful, he said, was, never close the door to ministry. It's a no right now, but it doesn't always have to be a no. So, um, but yeah, so that was like, okay, I really got to get going.
For
So
sure.
I hit the ground running and I completed a full season of that first business. I did everything wrong you could do, and I learned a lot. And at the end of it, I thought, wow, this was really hard, but I want to stick with it.
Hmm.
Um, I get into the late fall, and I just out of the blue get this job offer to work at a marketing company as an executive assistant for the CEO. And
Hmm.
it's like, I mean, I seriously was not looking for a job at all. I was working at Amazon in the morning shift, and then I was going to do a 9 to 5 because in the winter I didn't have enough business. And I'm like
Yep.
just committed to that plan.
Hmm.
And this guy comes along who I really respect. He's very successful, and he offers me this job. And um, I took the job, and I don't
Hmm.
regret it. I kind of realized if I want to go back to landscaping, I can.
Hmm.
And I could go into details about that job, but that's what I did for 2 years.
Okay.
Leaving that job is what then I led to Augusta. So that's
Okay.
kind of the timeline.
Okay,
So
during that time, were you listening to the content, or because you had gone into another field, was that kind of like, I don't need that right now, I switched to other things I'm listening to and doing?
I totally shut it off,
Okay.
partly because I'm a very obsessive person, and I
Mhm.
just felt like I couldn't do my new job well if I was keeping my feet in lawn care and landscaping. So I
Exactly.
really kind of had a clean break. And towards the end, when I realized, at the end of that 2 years, um, that was all like COVID and a lot of stuff happening, which
Mhm.
just completely changed the dynamic of that office job.
Mhm.
Um, then I started to jump back into the content, and that's when I decided I want to get back into lawn care. Going with Augusta was a no brainer for me.
Okay, now there was a
Yeah,
big life event for you that caused a shift, and if you could tell us about that, and then what time period in all of this that happened. Was it during the executive job, or was it, after
yeah,
this incident that there was like a turning point and then you went a complete different direction? So if you could share that, I think it would really help our listeners.
yeah. So I'm realizing this is probably such a confusing timeline, but before all of this, actually 10 years ago, so it was 2013, I was a senior in high school, and it's gonna be 10 years, like, in a couple weeks to the date of when it
Wow.
happened, but I was in a really bad car accident in March of 2013. So, in a sense, it's kind of like the prime of your life.
For sure.
Like physically, I was just finishing basketball season. I played soccer, basketball, baseball. We're getting ready for my senior year of baseball, and I was supposed to be going on my senior trip the next day. And it's a bizarre story,
Mhm.
but I was driving home on the interstate one night from Detroit, coming home, and it was about midnight or something, and a car in front of me stopped. Basically, it looked like fireworks were going off underneath the car, like tons of sparks. It was just bizarre, and it was slowly coming to a halt in the right lane of the interstate.
Hmm.
And I knew something was wrong, so I get off the road. I'm on the shoulder, and I run up to this car. When I get up to the car, there's no front tire on it, and the rim is gone. So it was actually like just riding on the rotor, just grinding. That's why all the sparks are going off, and it's kind of slumped
Wow.
down. I look in the car, and there's a lady basically just passed out in the driver's seat. And I'm on the shoulder on the
Mhm.
passenger side, and I'm just banging on the window. Ma'am, are you okay? Ma'am, are you okay? And nothing. She doesn't move. I run around to her side. One of the windows is slightly rolled down, but the doors are locked. And this all happened very quickly.
I'm
To
sure.
be honest, my memory is maybe unreliable on some things, but I know what did happen. Um, she turns and looks at me. There's like a street light. I can see her face better, and she's just completely drunk. And
Mm.
all while that was happening, I'm trying to open her door to get her out of the car. A
Mhm.
semi truck is heading down the interstate in her lane. Because she didn't have, she just stopped because of friction.
Yep.
There's no brake lights, and she doesn't have her hazards on. So this truck driver does not realize she stopped until the last second.
Oh
And
man.
he sees me at the side of the car, and he swerves to the middle of the interstate, and he misses her car, but he actually hits me with the side of his cab. And you know how the semi trucks, they have like a portion where they sleep. There's like
Right.
a more of a, it's not like the front of the grill where it's all metal. But
Mhm.
I got hit by that side of the cab, and that's what happened to me. So I was struck by the semi truck. Um,
Your whole
there's
body?
Yeah.
Like, and were you
So
partially in that vehicle? Like hanging in
I
that
w-
vehicle?
I was not in the vehicle at all. And that's the thing. Like, I remember things, but also it's kind of like the next couple years. Actually, I had a lot of memory loss. So
Yeah, I
even
can
that
imagine.
event is foggy. But from where, obviously, I survived. Spoiler alert. um,
We're
from where
glad.
I was struck, to where the ambulance picked me up was 115 feet. I
Amazing.
broke 7 ribs on my right side, 2 ribs on my left side, my collarbone, my shoulder blade. The shoulder in the socket actually broke. I broke my arm, tore my shoulder, it was dislocated. I broke 3 vertebrae in my neck, 2 skull fractures, punctured lung, lacerated liver. My knee was messed up, stitches everywhere. And you can't really see anymore besides like one random scar in my eyebrow. I used to have like a big bald spot there,
Mm,
but I was severely hurt and almost died. Um, so that I could go into all the details of that, but that's what happened. And that's what led to a long physical recovery. But the more interesting part to me is like the mental side of it.
for sure.
As a business owner, tying it back to us,
Right.
um, my first time in business and really even over the last 10 years has been a process of figuring out what can I handle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a traumatic brain injury and I went to college. I was almost failing all of my classes. Um, I'm not a genius, but that was never the case for me before. Like I was never
Right.
struggling in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized there was a lot of changes. I couldn't handle things like I used to, just organizationally in my brain. And that's where my first experience with the business, I realized I really suffered. Now, I think everybody struggles with that, right?
For sure.
But I just knew, like, it was more obvious I am weak in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
And Augusta is all about systems, organization, communication. It's like, hey, somebody that is good at the things that I'm struggling with, let's
Mm-hmm.
pair up. So that's really why in the back of my mind when I knew if I'm going to get back into this, I've got to go with Augusta.
Yeah. So you
So,
started watching, listening to the content again. And then what was the final thing that actually brought you to Augusta? Was it just the fact that he had started franchising and you're like, okay, this will work for me? Or what was the final thing? Was it that Mike had been vetted to you throughout the whole process and you had trust in that? Because you could have gone and done something else with some system.
yeah, I think it was probably just perfect timing of like the first time I was introduced to Mike, there was no franchise. And, I had started my own business. But then by the time I had really figured out what I wanted to do and I was leaving this corporate job, the franchise was a thing. And there was enough people where it was like, all right, it's really young, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a great opportunity to jump on. And then, I mean, it was like no fees based on your sales, this
Okay.
fixed
Yes.
monthly fee. That was a big thing for me. And because there's always a risk or you're deciding what are you willing to give up if you're
Exactly.
doing a franchise, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to shy away from that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of Augusta's strongest points in my mind is, hey, we are not looking to cap you. We want
Right.
to incentivize you. I mean, that's everything Mike does is how can I incentivize the people that are partnering with me so
Yes.
we can all succeed. So,
Yes.
but yeah, the franchising to me, it was just like, I really need the help, the
Mm-hmm.
community. So it was a no brainer once I knew I want to go back into business ownership.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you have a brand at all? Did you have a business name? Did you have employees? What was your revenue at the time that you joined, if you remember?
0.
Zero. Yeah.
Yeah, I started from scratch. So I quit my job again, went to zero income. I'm really good at that apparently. And actually what's really interesting is I had a guaranteed raise if I would have stayed at that job.
Wow.
And so some of my friends were like, you're kind of stupid.
Yep.
But I had the one blessing was I had the experience of making more than we needed to.
Yes.
And I just realized I'd rather pursue something else. There's no shame or no shade thrown at that other company, but
Yes.
just realized it wasn't for me. So, but yeah, I started from scratch.
Now, your wife, you guys were married by then, so
Yep.
you didn't have your baby. What did she think of you leaving something so secure and taking a risk with this young guy and with this young company?
My wife is extremely supportive. And I think one danger is that I'm so obsessive and can be like, when I get locked in on something, um, I really have to be careful to get opinions and advice from other people
Hmm.
before I go too far and it's like I can't be convinced otherwise.
Yes.
So my wife, when she knows I'm convinced of something, she's just very supportive. So I think it's more, once we were in, she was good. She's never
Yeah.
really, I think, as we've been a year or two into it now, it's kind
Hmm.
of like, hey, those kind of conversations were different than the initial one. But yeah, she
Yes.
has been very supportive, and we've had a we've never done anything with like $0 in the bank.
Hmm.
So we had some security there.
Okay, I'm sure. I'm sure. So over time, how do you feel that it's been for you overall?
Oh, I mean, hands down, it has been the best decision I could have done. Like
How many
if I'm
years?
gonna, what's that?
How many years are you in now?
So I've completed 2 full years. I'm starting my third year.
Okay.
Um, so I'm a few months into my third year, and I
Okay.
think the third year is a, Mike's talked about this. It's a big year for people, especially if you're starting from nothing.
Right.
Um, I mean, from 0 to 100,000 is just, there's just so much to learn,
There
and
is.
it's
So
also,
overwhelming.
it's not just learning business. It's learning, how do I mesh with Augusta and do this the right way, efficient
Hmm.
way. So I think the things I struggled with first year were very different from what I struggled with second year,
Hmm.
and the third year challenges will be different. So yeah, I mean, it's been so good, but I think there's a pivotal point, and you can touch on this because I know
Hmm.
you've spoken on this. You hit a point, especially with, you're coming into a partnership where it's all honeymoon phase at the
Hmm.
beginning,
Hmm.
and then you start to question things, or you start to think your way is better,
Hmm.
and you come to a tipping point at some moment where you realize, I'm either going to buy in or I'm going to just do it my own way.
Hmm.
And thankfully, I really feel like I'm on the other side of that, because I
Hmm.
I see the path, but there's just a lot of, I wouldn't say it's distrust, but you want validation for the decision you made, the purchase you
Yes.
made. And there
Yes.
is that voice in the back of your head that's like, did I make a bad decision? Did I
Right.
get duped by these nice people in Washington? Right.
Yeah.
That's just a natural part of it. So, um, but
And
yeah,
it's also very unusual to, it's not a large amount of people that get in on the bottom ground of something and grow with it. And one of the parts of the relationship thing is learning to trust somebody. And when you first get married or first have a relationship and you're in that honeymoon phase, then stuff starts to happen. And the other person actually does disappoint you. They actually do mess up and make mistakes. And so, of course, you're going to be, you almost become like a customer where you're like, okay, this is supposed to be about me. You're supposed to have it all together, and you are majorly messing up and disappointing me. And another thing I think for you, everything was valid because we were just learning as well and learning, messing up, pivoting. And we couldn't have done it without the feedback of people that had taken a risk to be with us. So it was very
right,
valuable. And you were incredibly good at, when you were frustrated, you would reach out right then in the moment, like, what am I seeing wrong? What is going on? This is messing up, this is happening. And I would be able to say, yeah, we did that, we messed that up, we'll work on that today, we'll try to fix it, and I'll get back to you. Obviously we need another system. Or I would say, no, you don't want us to do that, because if we did that for you, think big, think 500, 1,000 locations. If I do that for you, would I be able to just randomly all do that for you again? Will I mess up? Absolutely. So it's learning that, like, you have to
right,
trust the systems while we're building them. So it's an unusual relationship, but it, all these stages are vital. And one thing that really affected me about you is, as in any relationship, you have other people that give input. And sometimes when people, let's say they get married and they don't have a lot of support from their family, and then they have other people giving them advice. So it's like, is the person giving me advice wise, or are they actually putting poison into my marriage and trying to break it
Mhm.
apart? And I know there's always going to be people that like leave the franchise or whatever. But I
Right.
know that there was someone that was closest to you. And sometimes people are, they're very charismatic, like they're very passionate. And the questions they bring up seem so legitimate, and it causes you to doubt. And I remember specific times Mike would say, we'd be really busy. Something would, we'd just be busy. And he'd be like, I've got to talk to Derek. Like, Derek just reached out. I need to talk to him. And
Uh-oh.
it would be quite a bit later because he cares so much, and he knew that was happening. And so he needed to communicate with you, like, what is valid of what he's hearing, what are valid questions that I've got to address now, and what is this negativity that just keeps hounding him. How would you advise other people, because how did you get through that to like decipher between what is right, what is just normal relationship stuff, or what should I be, should I leave? Did I make mistakes? Is this person right? How do you work with that when somebody comes in and gives you advice?
Yeah, well, you make me sound awesome because you make me sound like I'm this oracle of wisdom, but the reality is it's not like I was a perfect franchisee. And I had
Okay.
to come to grips with and it, one of the cool things with Augusta is like you're going to get resources and books that we kind of like hold up as like these are awesome mindset books. I know you're a huge Jocko fan. I saw
Mm-hmm.
Jocko on your WhatsApp logo. Um, I love Jocko, and
Mm-hmm.
just there are principles that Augusta really promotes. And if you're in Augusta and you're reading the books that we're all supposed to be reading, or if we want to be growing, you're going to encounter topics like extreme ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's just so many things I could go through, but I had to come to grips with, am I actually doing the best of my ability? And I could look back at years 1 and 2 and say, man, I dropped the ball in this area or in this time. And that puts friction on the relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I don't follow the systems, command center has more difficulty, right? So um, it's a fine line because I think if you come into it with the mindset of a consumer, it will not go well. It is
No.
a partnership.
Yes.
And, if they can only do wrong and it's always like, hey, you're not doing what I need and you're
Mm-hmm.
not evaluating your side of it, um, that's got to be part of it, that you're realistic with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think, you know, I don't have a great answer to it
Mm-hmm.
because part of it is just emotions, and emotions are fickle and fleeting and seasonal. So, in the spring rush, everything's crazy and you feel a
Mm-hmm.
certain way. Um, but I think, what are the big reasons you came to Augusta?
Mm-hmm.
What are the big things you're committed to? And when I step back and I just list out all of the fundamental things I do because of Augusta, I would not be doing them on my own. If
Mm-hmm.
I did them, it would only because I learned them from
Right.
Augusta. But
Mm-hmm.
just like budgeted hours for my schedule, hourly rate. My hourly rate is based on a multiple of my base wage, and I'm using P for P, and I can look at how efficient is my company based on my scores and all this stuff. Like, it's just overwhelmingly Augusta has poured into me more than I have poured into
Mm-hmm.
Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
So I say all that to say, like, yes, mistakes will be made. Yes, things will happen. But why did you join?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do it your own way, just do it your own way. There's nothing wrong
Exactly.
with that. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah,
but
it
that's how
does.
I feel. And at times, though, um, maybe I was more cynical. Maybe I was more distrusting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Mike and you and Lee and everybody I've worked with, they don't shy away from the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I almost feel bad sometimes because I'm like, man, I don't know if my attitude was always the best, but Mike handled everything very well, and he was honest with me. He took time on the phone to talk. So, yeah, that was a bunch of rambling, but
No, that's great. That's
I
great. That
mean, you
answers
gotta
the
be
question.
I think you just gotta put your pride to the side a bit,
Hmm.
especially if you're getting in on the ground floor. There's gonna be upside that people that get in at number 1,000 won't have,
Oh,
but there's
exactly.
gonna be downside.
Right.
So, right? Like, it can't be all upside.
Yeah, and you can't
So,
overestimate, you can't underestimate the value of the relationships you have when you've gone through really hard things with people, and that is the way it is with the people at the beginning, because the others will stand on shoulders of great men and women who went through all the tough things to make it happen for them.
yeah,
But back to where you are now. So you've completed 2 seasons. That means you've gone through spring rush. You've gone through the times when it's pretty out in the desert there, not making a lot. And then there's things
yeah,
like winter services that we have, and you guys might have snow there. So
right.
what from 0 to what number are we at the end of the second season?
Yeah, so last season was just about 230,000 in revenue. Um, I have I probably have done things differently than some. I've
Mm-hmm.
been really heavy on the recurring mowing side
Smart.
and not as many huge projects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which, there I'm not saying that's the better way to do it, but sometimes it's like I'm really happy now going into year 3 because we've got a
Mm-hmm.
large recurring base. So this
Exactly.
year is really exciting. Years 1 and 2, though, at times have been slow and frustrating, but mainly more just you gotta take that on yourself. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, last year was about it was a little under 230 grand in revenue. And this year I'm really excited. We're going to be filling to our capacity, and I think
And
it's going to be
how
a
do you
great
determine
year.
that? How do you determine filling to your capacity? Is that how many employees you currently have? How many employees you had in the midst of the last season, or how many trucks you have? How do you determine what your maximum capacity is going to be?
Yeah, well, I think you could look at like your current assets that you have and just say, if I have 2 trucks, my capacity, at least unless I make a decision to change it, my
Mm-hmm.
capacity is going to be what I would do would be 4 employees. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that includes myself. That's a different discussion, but
Right.
4 revenue producers, 2 per truck, and how many budget hours are reasonable per person. You start working all that math out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wasn't thinking that way. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't thinking as clearly or as in touch with the numbers earlier on. So that's some of the big shifts that I was so caught up in a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
When at the end of the day, you really got to know your numbers and realize get away from the starting line as quickly as possible. Get to
Yes.
a level. You just need a minimum capacity to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, but yeah, you could look at your capacity of I need to fill these trucks, and then you would have a decision: do I have the money to expand, or am I willing to pay the cost to expand, take debt,
Right.
whatever decisions you want to make. Um, there's an element of personal capacity. Can you actually handle going more? That's a little more subjective, but the
Mm-hmm.
the asset and labor capacity is very mathematical.
Mhm. Can you tell
Um,
us a little bit more about the maximum capacity for you as a person and what you can handle? I know that you've spoken on this before, and it was almost like I'll just share a little bit. Mike and I had flown down to Michigan, and we were able to attend another conference, and then it was really awesome, very rare. You were able to drive up and have dinner with us, and we were just able to lock in and share. And I remember you saying, yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. I just feel like I'm talking all about this. He goes, but I don't have anyone. And that hit me really hard because I realized this is another reason why we have Augusta. It's the people that have been vetted and are in Augusta are people that you can trust and collaborate with. But it was people that I like, I won't say your own level, but people who get it. And to us, it wasn't boring to hear everything you had to say. It related to everything we were doing. And then one thing you specifically shared was you talked about human capacity and comparison. against other, and I would say this isn't just Augusta, it's comparison against all other business owners, people that you see doing better, not doing as well. And the realization that you came to was huge for us. And Mike used that in a lot of content after, and it just really caused us to look at things a different angle. But to hear you share it, could you tell us about that experience for you?
Yeah. Honestly, this is like, it's almost like a passion topic for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the whole reason bringing up the accident, it kind of ties into it in a way that I haven't shared as much with Augusta,
Right.
or others, because um, just honestly, there's a lot of baggage with that event in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what has been great for me, though. Over the last 2 years with Augusta, there's been tremendous growth, and it's God's kindness to me. But um, you've got to be just realistic with the person in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, what can I handle? What am I good at? What am I not good at? And okay, assess the situation. Don't make excuses. Just assess the situation, and then be realistic with yourself as you plan what can be improved upon. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh, I'm this fixed person that cannot be more organized, or fill in the blank. Like, it could be anything. I think about fitness and nutrition, or just your spiritual life. For me, as a church member, and my relationship with God, if I'm not ever praying or reading my Bible, and I'm just like, I'm taking this victim mentality of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, I need to be doing the disciplines, and doing what I can control. So this personal capacity aspect, though, it's big to me because, well, I think the big event last year for me was my son was born the first week of mowing. I mean, the day we were supposed to start mowing, my wife went into labor,
I
and
remember.
I was hiring multiple people, and two people starting new that week. And it's just crazy. And there's
Insane.
things I'm doing differently now. I'm actually grateful for those mistakes, because it just showed me how inefficient things were. And there was a lot to learn from it. But
What was the
I
mistake? Getting pregnant at the wrong time?
mistake number one.
Don't get
Excuse,
pregnant, people, right when your baby's going to be born and during the spring season.
yeah, yeah, that was definitely mistake number one. But I learned a lot through that, because that spring, I mean, my wife just needed me in a way she didn't
For
before.
sure. Hmm.
So I could get the lack of sleep, go out and work all day, and that's me. But
Right.
my wife needs me.
Right.
And now you're getting these different pressures. And um, I made a vow to my wife. I didn't make a vow to Augusta.
Right.
And Augusta needs to succeed, but I can't just tell my pregnant wife, who's going through, after having a baby and your body's going through these hormones, like, it's just a crazy time. And
Right.
eventually I hit a point where I was starting to burn out.
Hmm.
Um, and I think from that point on, there was a slowly evaluating, and through the summer, then coming into the fall, there's been a big turning point for me. But I'm getting sidetracked from your original question. But
No, that's
that,
good. That's good. That because we talk a lot about we're always driving. We're all striving to be better. We're all trying to grow our business. And from your experience and you sharing and us going through that with you, it was like, oh, we always talk about growing and growing fast and all this, but some people, they need to take a year and not grow. They need to maintain. They need to keep their sanity with their family and themselves. And so we need to actually put that out there and be aware of it. From your experience, I wouldn't say that those were so much mistakes, even in the business, because how are you to know it was going to snow the first day of mowing season? You did what you were supposed to do. You got the 2 employees and you were ready to roll. And
yeah,
thank God you had Augusta at that time, because you were
right,
doubtful of some things like over the phone estimates. We had made mistakes. And so you had drawn back from that. That's where we measure Google Earth Pro, and then we give prices over the phone. And so you had been wary of that and hadn't done it. And when you were in the hospital, I was like, please, please, please let me try. And so I'm sure we made mistakes, but we were able to get you some mowing customers. And, it was good. It snowed actually in those first few
Yeah.
days because it gave you a bit of a delay. So there's nothing about that I would call accidents. It's just, I guess next year you would just make sure you had support that could
Right.
run it when you weren't there. But that's why you have us, really, is to jump in, move things around, say what needs to be said without disturbing any relationship with the customer. So when
Yeah.
we had our conference this year, we actually had you talk about that, which was soon after you and Mike and I had met in Michigan. And so you would say now that you have found a balance, like with spiritual, with your wife, with Augusta, for yourself.
I I guess how I would describe it is maybe on paper not much has changed. However, it's a very uh it's like a daily practice, just mentally, a mindset of how you interpret the things that you're facing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I mean by that is like um being less emotional and using less emotional language with what you face.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
good.
this week, um, things went wrong. We had a truck in the shop and we're like, okay, we got a big bill. Let's get it taken care of. The next day, there was a different issue with that same truck. Those things just happen. And
Yep.
um, trying to just detach yourself from the situation,
Right. It's just business.
prioritize and
Yep.
execute. You know what I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to say, right? Like
Yep.
just evaluating what needs to be done. All this mental clutter of like, oh my goodness, this is going wrong, and this and this and this. It's like, is that really helping you?
Mm-hmm.
No, you. So there's a fine line because I'm not saying be a robot, don't feel anything, but um, you really got to just prioritize what needs to be done, make quick decisions. And this is nothing new. Like Mike
Yep.
has been big on this stuff, right? Sometimes you got to break yourself from things. And maybe that's, my journey. I've got to grow in that area more, and others people got to grow in a different area, right?
For sure.
But I think the comparison issue is a big part of it, right?
For
Because
sure. Yes.
um, Augusta is amazing, but there's nothing wrong with Augusta. The problem is with you when you get into Augusta,
Mm-hmm.
you start looking at other people. This guy's doing this amazing thing. This guy's doing this amazing thing. This lady's doing this amazing thing, right?
Yep.
And you somehow internalize that and you feel negative.
Mm-hmm.
How could you feel negative by positive energy? It's
Yeah.
because you're interpreting it in comparison to yourself.
That's really
And
good.
that's been a freeing thing for me as well
Mm-hmm.
is um, why would I care what my revenue is compared to other people if they did it in year
Exactly.
one?
Yeah.
Um, I know where I could have done better, and I'm focusing on that now, and
Mm-hmm.
that's been part of the journey. So, but I
But
think
maybe they're not trying to give time to church and still serve there, and maybe they don't have a wife and a child, and so those are always things to consider. Like it's not even reasonable to assume that you're going to do what a single guy does when he's out there working. Like he could really work from dawn to dusk, and
right,
and that's all he cares about. He's building his business, so like it's unreal to even compare, as you know now.
yeah, and it's really I don't even know how to say it, but it's just like it is what it is. When you get
Yep.
into the plan and you start seeing how it's unfolding, evaluate that, prioritize, make your decisions, but just go with it. You don't have to place value and judgment on how it's stacking up to your original plan. I think
Mm-hmm.
as long as you have good advisors, that's a big
Right.
caveat, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're on your own and you're like, well, just got to stick with the plan, not be emotional, maybe your plan's bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it ties in coaching calls every month. I mean, there's just so much that Augusta is pouring in.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got other voices saying, hey, your plan makes sense or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But when you've got some surety there, you can stick to the plan and make adjustments on the way. But all the emotional baggage and ups and downs, it's really just going to make it harder on you.
For sure. So that kind of leads me in the next segment that I want to talk about. And that is relationships that you have found inside Augusta that you wouldn't have had otherwise. The people that have been brought together for you.
Oh
Have
yeah.
you experienced people as a whole to be supportive? And then have you gotten any really close relationships of people that you can bounce stuff out and kind of
Oh,
balance
for
each other
sure.
out?
I think yeah, hands down, like Augusta for me was systems and a path, but maybe not as equal, but like I really actually felt like the community part, because my first year of doing lawn care, I hit that low of
Yes.
just, it's a seasonal business, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to hit a point where probably you're not going to feel great. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a great quote by Teddy Roosevelt. I actually wrote it down. It's not my favorite quote, so I'll save that for later. But
Okay.
he says 90% of the work in this country is done by people who don't feel good. And it's just kind of this reminder, like,
I love it.
um, we place a lot of value on feelings today in society, and like doing your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that and that's your guidepost, you'll be really disappointed because you're always going to have moments of feelings failing you. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, the community was a huge aspect for me because I knew, I mean, partly kind of ties back to, I felt like, um, I deal with this less now, but I actually really struggled with emotional swings and frustration, irritation from like for periods of my life after this
Oh,
traumatic,
I'm sure.
excuse me, traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
and I saw it as a vulnerability in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that way less now because I'm just trying to not have that event
Right.
become
The,
like a victim mentality for me
right.
where I point everything back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew the community would be valuable. So Nick Reed, who you know well,
Mm-hmm.
um, I've talked more to Nick Reed on the phone than probably anyone in my life except for my wife. Like,
Wow,
he's
that's awesome.
a great friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a guy that has a ton of friends, honestly, in my personal life. I have my church family and I hang out with people, but Nick has been a huge friend for me, bouncing off the ideas, and we talk about this stuff a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
we both have really been invigorated about this, like cutting down social media and YouTube and that kind of stuff in our life, and just how that can hurt your personal capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick has been a huge friend. I mean, I could list off several. Dylan Martin in Louisiana has been a great friend. We have very similar lives. He's got a young baby and married, and
Yep.
um, there's so many people that have helped me. Ryan Payne in Texas with Christmas lights, and um, I feel bad listing people because I'm going to leave people out.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I have great friends from Augusta now,
I love it.
um, that are really helpful.
Okay, I would like to ask you a question that maybe I really couldn't ask anybody else. But you were raised in a Christian home and with Christian family, and that was very important to you. And it actually was something that you wanted to minister in, and you wanted to have an impact and serve people that way. And then that changed and went into business. Looking back on that, do you feel like the burden that you had and the desire that you had to do that has somehow and in some way been able to be fulfilled in business with employees, and especially with employees, customers too, serving, but leading and guiding your employees? Has that, do you feel like you're ministering in some way?
I would say, yeah, I don't know how to answer in such a clear like yes or no, but
Mm-hmm.
I I take a lot of joy in that dynamic, and I think that's probably one of the most motivating things to me is that um I wouldn't say like it's fulfilling what I was pursuing
For sure.
in ministry, because I still now I have the opportunity to like work with the youth group, and I teach in the youth group, and I do a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that is a huge motivating factor for me. Is it's kind of trying to replicate what my parents did for me. They're
Mm-hmm.
very financially minded, very frugal. Um, you know, My dad did not make a lot of money, but we never went hungry, and they were
Mhm.
very frugal. My grandparents were very frugal. So there was a lot of financial mindedness, and they taught us to work. Like I started working when I was 7, delivering newspapers. And then we did newspaper routes all the way through high school and mowed lawns. And it was just what we did. And it was such an advantage because tons of
Mhm.
people don't ever work until they're out of high school,
Yeah.
and they have no idea how to handle money. They have no idea how to actually be a good worker. And that for me is like, not that I'm anybody's parent, but I'm trying to be an influence in their life like my parents were for me because
Yeah,
they
that's awesome.
probably don't have it. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, in the ministry side as well, um, that's why I would say it's not like a clear yes or no, but there's definitely an aspect there where you're impacting people, you're trying to help them. That is very fulfilling for me, and
Mhm.
it's probably the most sustaining thing about it.
Yeah. So it sounds like all the good that you had in your life that maybe some of them didn't have, you're able to pour back into them.
Yeah, that's the hope for sure. That's the
Yeah,
hope.
definitely. So we're coming close to the end, but my very favorite part is that I love to learn. I love quotes. I love anything that like motivates me, or not even motivate. That's a cliche word, but really pushes me to be better from many different angles. And if you could share some of your favorite podcasts, books, and then there's hardly ever just a favorite quote, but some quotes that people could take away.
Yeah. Um, Podcasts, books, quotes. I would say for podcasts, I actually really like C Suite Unfiltered. So I got to give
Yes, I
shout
do
out to
too.
Lee and Mike. I don't listen to. I'm maybe a little weird in some ways. I have actually tried to cut back what I consume.
Mhm.
I don't suggest that for people because most people probably need to consume more.
Right, right.
I found myself sometimes like consuming too much to where it
Mhm.
was like I'd get home, I couldn't even have a conversation with Jen because I've been listening to voices all day.
That's
Um,
good. Yeah.
so I don't do as many business podcasts. I would say just all of Mike's content on
Mhm.
YouTube would maybe be my podcast. As far as books, I've really leaned into books and actually trying to read physical books before bed, just cutting out screen time.
Oh, that's good.
Um,
Yeah.
so, like books I've read, I mean, all of the Jocko books. I'm a
Mhm.
huge fan of Jocko, Extreme Ownership, all of his books. Um, Atomic Habits I just read recently.
That's a good one.
Um, The Dream Manager, I found that
Yes.
to be it's like a fable style, but it's
Yeah.
really geared towards employees and it's a good mindset shift. Trying to help people in maybe low skill jobs find ways to progress with the company or progress personally to achieve their goals.
Yeah, great book.
The books one, I don't know. There's a lot on my list.
No, those are really
Uh,
good. I'll listen to all those again.
and then as far as quotes, I actually had this one ready. Like you said, it's hard to pick one quote.
Mhm.
Um, One that I like a lot of Teddy Roosevelt quotes,
Mhm.
and the reason I mentioned that to you originally was I think maybe my favorite one is the man in the arena.
Yeah.
My dad would say that to us a lot growing
Mhm.
up. Um, so I love that quote. Um, but because that one's so amazing, I'll pick another one. He says, "Who among you would teach your boys that ease, that peace is to be the first consideration in their eyes, to be the ultimate goal after which they strive? You men of Chicago have made this city great. You men of Illinois have done your share, and more than your share, in making America great, because you neither preach nor practice such a doctrine." And that's kind of like in the middle of a speech he's giving to these people.
Gives me
But
chills. That's
he
awesome.
just talks about how um, a recurring theme for him is like not choosing the easy path or just striving for peace and idleness, but
Mhm.
actually taking up the strenuous life. And he talks about how in the Civil War, if we had just pursued peace, we could have saved many lives, right? But people were willing to take up arms and do the hard thing.
Mhm.
Um, so I really like that one, but there's a lot of Teddy Roosevelt ones I love. That's a big theme for him. So
Yeah, yeah, I love his too. So what would you say to somebody who's struggling right now? We're just going into the spring season. Some people are really scared, and maybe
yeah.
they don't have all their ducks in a row. Maybe they don't feel really prepared. But let's say they are going into their third year, which is encouraging if they've made it that far. And what would you say to the people that are where you were these past 2 years? And now that you're coming into a good place, you're going to have a good year this year. What would you say to them?
Um, I think part of it is I know what's coming, and if you've made it through 2 years, you should know what's coming.
Yep.
So I would say, don't believe this like lie that you now that like one temptation, right? It sounds like I'm just like rock steady. I've got it figured out. But I know that in a month there
Yep.
will be these things that hit us. They're waves. They're not
Mm-hmm.
predictable, and it's going to be like I think a big thing is just when you experience things, you recognize it. You recognize how you're feeling. And I'm not a big self-talk person,
Mm-hmm.
but one thing that I actually have started to say to myself is emotions are a state of mind based on the circumstances and the setting around me. And I just
Mm-hmm.
say that sometimes because, like 10 minutes ago, I felt totally fine. I
Mm-hmm.
just got a call from this person. They're upset or this thing went wrong. Now I feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like nothing really has changed besides my feelings. I've got to do some different things now, but um, just know you're gonna feel stressed out and that will
Yep.
hit you. But if you can recognize that and try to just like kind of just deflect it, um, you're not going to internalize it and dwell on it. That's where things get bad.
Yep.
You dwell on things, you make slower decisions, things pile up. So just focus on what you can control. The night before, prioritize your tasks for the day. So you're removing mental clutter for the next day. Maybe you don't have enough time, delete all social media from your phone.
Yep.
Like, well, there goes an hour and a half that you now have.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could sit here and preach, but I think you really got to take a look at yourself. Are my
Mm-hmm.
ducks in a row? Am I eating in a good way? Do I have some routine with my fitness? Do I, you know, spiritually, am I walking the way I should be walking?
Mm-hmm.
Um, my relationships with my family. You got to take a look at yourself. Don't be a victim and
Mm-hmm.
really do what needs to be done, but don't place emotional value on everything that's happening around you.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. All right. Well, on that note, we'll close out for today. And I can't thank you enough for the time. I know, like you said, it's going to be insane in the next month and the floodgates are going to open. And so here we are right at the beginning of that. So I hope we were encouragement to some people. And I appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz.
Have a great day.
You too.